Hey everybody, Big Friendly here. Before we start the video, I just want to say at the end, I'm going to show you something I did to try to find the fourth clue in Swordquest Earthworld. And you're going to see just how insane and crazy I was. Alright, let's go ahead and watch the video. You know, it's really hard to believe it's been over 40 years since I was a naive 12 or 13-year-old. But that's when the Swordquest series started back in 1982. And that was the first time I heard about it. I wasn't a subscriber to the Atari Age magazine, but they did show Swordquest ads in some of the regular gaming magazines. And plus, at the local game club, they had posters and displays about the game before it came out. And on the surface, Swordquest wasn't just any contest. It was a globe-spanning adventure from the biggest name in video games at the time, Atari. You know, in 1982, they were still on top of the world, and even though the crash wasn't too far away, nobody at this point really saw it coming. And they revealed a 4-part fantasy series called Swordquest. The prize for mastering these games, it wasn't just bragging rights, it was real physical gold treasure with jewels. We're talking about the Talisman of Truth, made from 18-karat solid gold covered with diamonds and birthstones, a Chalice of Light forged from platinum and gold sparkling with rubies and sapphires, a crown, a Philosopher's Stone, and the final grand prize, the Sword of Ultimate Sorcery, with a solid gold handle, a silver blade, and stunning array of jewels, valued by itself at $50,000. Now, this was back in 1982/83, so, you know, you figure it's a lot of money. In total, the prize pool was worth a staggering $150,000. It was one of the most audacious, ambitious, and flat-out exciting ideas in gaming history. And when I first heard about it, I was darned excited. This was the promise of an epic adventure of tangible rewards for digital mastery. It was a crossover event involving games, DC Comics, and real-world treasure hunts that was, you know, really ahead of its time. I'd never heard of anything like it to do with a video game, for sure. So how did something that looked so awesome on the surface, that looked this ambitious, end up as an basically unplayable, nonsensical, and legendary mess? How did Atari's supposed magnum opus become a masterclass in disastrous game design, baffling puzzles, if you even want to call them that, and spectacular failure? Let's look into it and find out. Now, at this time, in the early 80s, Atari was, you know, they were still on top of the world. I mean, everybody wanted an Atari, or if they had another system like a ColecoVision, they still wanted the Atari adapter so they could play 2,600 games. And I think it'd be fair to say that Swordquest could be called, it was, well, let's just say it was meant to be Atari's crowning achievement. The idea grew out of another Atari smash hit from a few years before called Adventure. We all remember that game, which famously had one of the first known video game Easter eggs. Atari's marketing team saw how much buzz that one secret created and decided to build an entire series around finding clues. The plan was absolutely wild. 4 games for the Atari 2600, Earthworld, Fireworld, Waterworld, and Airworld. You have to admit that sounds really, really cool. Each game was a gateway to a tournament, and the winner of each one would get one of the 4 treasures. Then those 4 champions would be flown out for a grand finale to compete for the Sword of Ultimate Sorcery. To flesh out this epic, Atari, which was owned by Warner Communications, roped in its sister companies. DC Comics was hired to create the comic book for each game. These weren't just for flavor. They were a core part of the puzzle. The game would spit out a page and panel number on the screen pointing you to a hidden word in the comic book. The Franklin Mint, a company known for its high-end collectibles, was commissioned to create the 5 magnificent prizes for the contest. The marketing push was immense. Full-page magazine ads, a dedicated fan club, and sheer spectacle of the prizes generated massive hype.
Gold, 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 gold.
Atari had sold players a dream, a multimedia fantasy quest that blurred the lines between the game world and our own. It was a promise that the primitive hardware of the Atari 2600 just unfortunately really couldn't deliver on. Actually, I think it's possible they could have, but they didn't. The first game in the Swordquest series, Earthworld, dropped in October of 1982, and it didn't take long after playing it to realize there were some issues. The game was themed around the zodiac with 12 rooms representing the signs, and that's cool. I have no problem with that. Your goal was to wander through these rooms, pick up various items, and place them in the correct rooms to reveal clues for the comic book puzzle. Here's the problem. There was absolutely no logic to it. The item and room-to-room combinations were completely and totally random. There was no lore, no in-game text, and nothing to guide you. The game never tells you. It was a tedious grind of brute force trial and error, mindlessly picking up every item. You could carry 6 at a time, taking it to every room and just hoping something would happen. As one reviewer perfectly put it, if there's any logic to this, it is not at all obvious. If they intended for us to find the solution through sheer trial and error, that's idiotic from both a practical and a game design perspective. The gameplay between this item swapping nightmare wasn't any better. I mean, you move between rooms that look basically the same except for the colors are different. And on a few of them you have these very simplistic and repetitive mini games. They weren't really, there was nothing special about them. They were very uninspired. Excuse me, they were very uninspired and felt totally disconnected from any kind of puzzle solving. The Aquarian Rapids especially was a pain in the ass because there wasn't an item that could allow you to skip it. And it was like a Frogger ripoff. I mean, and the I don't know if the little rafts or whatever they are would change. You'd be standing on one waiting to jump to the next and it would change it to a different shape and you would fall and have to start all the way over it. Oh, it was terrible. Even by Atari 2600 standards, the graphics were, there was nothing special. The sprites for the items were pretty pixelated. And the grand adventure promised, it looked so good, it looked so promising in the DC comic, was just reduced to wandering through identical looking rooms, playing mini games that were more frustrating than fun. That's about as simple as you can put it. The second game, Fireworld, was released in February of 1983, and I didn't buy it. I did rent it from the Home Video Game Club just out of curiosity. I played it briefly at the store, and word had already gotten around that it wasn't any better than Earthworld. This time they changed it up and they based the map of the game around the Kabbalah Tree of Life. That was its theme. And I mean, again, I have no problem with that. But this time they put a challenge sequence in every room, whereas in Earthworld you had, I think, 4 of them for the 12 rooms. Every time you went into a room, there was one. And they were really strange. Of course, it was Fireworld, so they tried to make it, kind of fit that theme. There was like you were catching flaming swords falling down in a basket or something. There was one where you shot snakes. You were like a bird and you shot snakes. And it was really buggy. It was really, really buggy. I mean, sometimes you would feel like you were winning. You were doing okay. You were catching everything and it would just kick you back out. And there'd be other times where you might be missing some of the blades as they're falling faster and faster, and it lets you in. So the whole thing was just a buggy mess. And another thing, and to me, this is the ultimate tell that Atari, I don't know who was But the programmers or whatever were just like, the hell with this, let's just get it out. Everybody knows this thing is a bunch of crap. It was that when you found the clues, they didn't even line up to the comic book this time. I think it was just 0-0 or maybe, or I don't. It didn't do it though. They didn't even take the time to even do that. And it's my opinion, because they believed the game sucked and they knew it was a bomb, and they just wanted to hurry it up and get it out the door to get whatever they could for it. It really makes me mad when I think back to it. Basically now, the gap between the marketing that you had before the series started and the reality of just how terrible these games were was a chasm. Again, you had a beautiful comic with beautiful art from legends like George Perez, told stories of high fantasy and epic clashes, but the games delivered a confusing, unrewarding, and repetitive slog. You weren't a hero in a grand quest, you were more like a digital janitor, endlessly rearranging furniture in a series of drab, pixelated rooms. The shared experience for players wasn't adventure, but a growing sense of simple frustration and disappointment. Damn thing was a joke. Atari should be ashamed of themselves. Now, there was something, I didn't know it back then. I guess nobody really did, except for the people who actually went to Atari and played for the prizes. The finalists did. The discovery was made that the entire game, or games, were pointless. Playing them was pointless. Players, learned that you didn't even need to play the game to have a chance to win the prizes. Hidden in the instructions of each comic book in the front was a hint. In the Earthworld comic, if you look at it, the words prime and number were printed in a slightly different color. This, for people who caught this clued them in to the fact that the only hidden words in the comic that mattered were on prime numbered pages. You could just scan the comic for those specific pages, find the words, fill out your entry, submit the words on your entry without ever having to suffer through the awful puzzles in mini games. The core mechanic of the entire series, this synergy between the game and the comic, was a total sham. And it's a good thing, because years later, when I finally figured out what the solution was to the game itself, I realized that nobody ever would have solved it. I want to know back then, who is running this thing? Who is doing the communication between the people that are doing the comic and all that, and the people making the game? Was there any talk at all between these people? Obviously when Fireworld came along, there wasn't, because they didn't even put the pages in. But it's just, the whole thing is just a joke. They took this thing that was on the surface looked so fantastic, and they totally just destroyed it. What a bunch of jacklegs, man. Well, anyway, the revelation of the little clue in the comic book, combined with by the time Waterworld was set to release in early 1984, Atari and everybody else in the gaming industry had other problems. The market was crashing hard. Atari went from being one of the fastest growing companies on Wall Street to a company that was hemorrhaging money. To cut their losses for the whole thing, they made Waterworld a mail order exclusive for Atari Club fans, for Atari Club members, the magazine members. And that would end up making Waterworld one of the most popular rare cartridges for the Atari, because it was never released in stores. The public contest was quietly canceled. The programmer for the fourth game, Airworld, which was supposed to be based on the I Ching, was pulled from the project to work on a port of Xevious. Swordquest, Atari's grand vision, was officially dead. Swordquest Earthworld was never finished. For decades, it was a piece of lost media. There was a rumor over the years a prototype got out, and I think there was even a fake one that was all been debunked. Its programmer, Todd Fry, confirmed that only about 20% of the game was complete when the whole thing was axed. It wasn't until 2022, as a part of the Atari 50 anniversary collection, celebration collection, that a new version of Airworld was created by Digital Eclipse and released, bringing a symbolic end to the series 40 plus years later. I never played that. If any of y'all did, let me know in the comments if it was any good, or if it was, what it was like. I'd be interested in hearing. But what about the other treasures? The fate of them has become one of gaming's most enduring urban legends. Now, they existed. The prize, even though the contest never finished, all the prizes were already minted and made. There were witnesses. The people who went to the contest saw them with their eyes. You've already seen that picture in this video of the sword. And I remember Michael Rideout in Atari Age, or in an interview somewhere I read online, he was the one that won the chalice. He said that when he saw the Philosopher's Stone, he was totally taken aback. He loved it. He's like, man, I sure would like to win that. But as far as the two prizes that were awarded, the Talisman of Truth was won by Stephen Bell for the Earthworld contest, and he didn't hold back. And in a move that probably broke a lot of hearts, Bell reportedly had the main part of the talisman melted down for cash. I think he used it to buy a car. I think maybe I heard it was a Fiero or something like that. Years ago, he was talking about using it to pay for college. He kept a tiny sword that was, hanging on the front of it, but apparently, from what I've come to understand, it was stolen from him sometime later and is now lost to time. I wonder if you would think it would still exist somewhere. I wonder what happened to it. I wonder if somebody knew he had it or kept it that knew about the game and the contest and broke in his house and took it. The Chalice of Light, won by Michael Rideout. Fortunately, he turned out to be a more sentimental winner. I think to this day he has it in a safe deposit box at his bank. He has done some interviews over the years. There's pictures of him holding it, and I found interview with him in recent years. I did talk to him a while back on Atari Age. It's probably been close to 10 years ago, and he talked about. I asked him if he'd had any offers on it and stuff like that. Nobody's ever really offered him near enough money for what it's worth. I tell you one thing: if I hit the lottery and I was a gazillionaire, I would buy it from him. You have to think now. When you think back to the way the retro gaming market has gotten, as far as how expensive things have become over the years, especially really, really rare games, how much they can fetch. I mean, you're talking, if they're complete in box, you're talking some games maybe getting tens of thousands of dollars. This is stuff for the Atari. It gets even more insane if you go, with the later stuff, Nintendo and stuff like that. But I think it might be fair to say that chalice, a lot of people probably don't know about it that are younger because they just never heard about this, but it has to be one of the most precious video game related items in history. Let me know what y'all think. I certainly think it is. Oh man, I would love just to hold that thing, just to rub my hand over the gold and just feel the weight of it. That would be very special. It really, really would. Now the contest for the crown of life for Waterworld was canceled. The remaining finalists were reportedly paid a settlement of around $2,000 each. I think Waterworld was probably the easiest game of the three, so there were a lot more people, that were in it. So they paid them $2,000 to buy them off. And Bell and Rideout, the two original winners of Earthworld and Fireworld, received an additional $15,000 each to agree to the contest cancellation. Would have been so freaking cool. Back in those days, without the internet, it would never happen. It wouldn't have been so cool if none of them would have signed. If they'd have been like, the hell with y'all, we want the gold. That would have been so awesome. But like I say, back in those days, and plus $15,000 is a lot of money back in 1984. That's a boatload of cash. And now we come to the story of the prizes themselves. The crown, the Philosopher's Stone, and the Sword of Ultimate Sorcery, of course, they vanished. And you had theories that swirled around for years. Probably the most popular one was that, Atari, Warner sold Atari in 1984 and to the Trammell family, and Jack Trammell supposedly got his hands on the sword and he had it hanging over his fireplace, and I think that's pretty much been 100% debunked. Besides, it's ridiculous to think that Atari would, whenever they sold Atari, they would include those prizes when the contest had been canceled. I don't think Trammell had any interest in acquiring them. As much as I hate to admit it, and I'm sure y'all do too, we have to assume the most boring thing happened, and that is that the Franklin Mint simply repossessed the prizes and melted them down and used them for other projects, which is really, really unfortunate. I would love to be wrong. Oh my God, I would love to see the sword pop up, or just the sword. The rest of them could go. If the sword still existed, that would be so great. And once again, this is, in my opinion, of course, the crash happened. It would have happened, even if Swordquest was a great game, the crash would have happened. So we have to figure that this still could have been inevitable. But if the games were good, could the Swordquest series have survived to the end? If it's a good game, it's a fun game, maybe Trammell decides to get it, to take it, to continue it. I don't know. I wish it could have been different. It just really, this is one of those things that bothers me so much. It's not like I obsess over it now, but whenever I start really thinking about it back in the past, it bothers me. It really, really, really bothers me. When you think about how bad like Pac-Man sucked for Atari, how it was such just a shoddy game that was rushed and released, all that to me is nothing compared to Swordquest, just because of all the time I invested into it. And I'm going to talk about that. So ultimately, why did the Swordquest games and the series suck so much? It was a total system failure and lack of communication in my part. And you just have to wonder if Atari, if they were even, maybe in the background there were already a lot of problems and they realized they were losing money, and just the whole thing was just a disorganized mess, I guess. Of course, the puzzles were a joke. They weren't even real puzzles. The random trial and error stuff was who wants to do that? Nobody wants to do that. Gameplay was repetitive, unrewarding. Simplistic mini games. Fireworld was buggy. The lofty, complex themes of having the Zodiac and the Kabbalah were really disconnected from the actual experience. In theory, it seems cool, but it didn't really work, and it just more confused players, especially on Fireworld. On top of that, the graphics were nothing special, even by Atari standards. Ultimately, Swordquest is a classic cautionary tale. It's a story of a company at the peak of its power, so blinded by a brilliant marketing concept that it in turn forgot the most important part. You got to make the game fun. It has to make sense. The promise on the box was an epic adventure, but the reality on the screen was a sloppy mess. In many ways, Swordquest was a perfect symbol for Atari in the early 80s, overflowing with hubris and ambition just before the crash that brought the entire industry to its knees. It stands today not as a timeless classic that it was meant to be, but as one of the more legendary, spectacular, and fascinating failures in video gaming history. No doubt about it. Hey, thank y'all if you're still here. I want to share some personal experiences just to let you know how insanely addicted, I wouldn't even say addicted, obsessed would be more like it, I was with Swordquest Earthworld. Now, when I first got the game, me and my best buddy Jim, a real smart guy, solved Rubik's Cube way back then, and we played the game, and of course we found the 16-4 clue, because all you have to do is walk up to Ares and it pops up, and we, looked at the manual and looked at the comic, and then, we stared at it for a little while, and then boom, that spire from the tower hit, and Jim's like, look, it says Spire. Oh man, we were like, oh yeah, this is so cool, so freaking cool. So we just kept on playing, and then all of a sudden, boom, 8-4 pops up, and we're like, whoa, You look through the comic, find the clue. Oh man, this is awesome. And we kept on for a long time after that. We played and we played. We couldn't find anything else though. No more clues popped up. So it got to the point where Jim was like, Scott, I'm done with this, man. I just can't do it anymore. But I wouldn't give up. I kept on by myself. And there was even a short window where I was living in denial for a little while, where I just wouldn't accept the fact that Swordquest Earthworld just sucked. There had to be a solution. There had to be a clue that would help you find the next clue. I studied and I scrutinized both the manual and the comic over and over and over. I found all the word clues that were in the comic book, but I looked over it some more. There had to be an answer. Surely there's no way it could just be totally trial and error. Surely they wouldn't do that. But they did. They damn sure did. Now, because of my dedication and hard work toward trial and error, there's no other way, I stumbled upon the third clue, 25-6. And of course, I jumped for joy. I was excited. And after figuring out what objects were, what set it off, I called Jim, and he got excited. And for a small window, just a short time, when I went to school and told other people who were, they'd already been like, man, why are you still playing that crap? Everybody kind of got excited, for a little while. But once I figured out that it was two items that set the clue off, that's when I was like, oh, okay, they're just making it two items in two separate rooms. Okay, is there a way I could do this? So this is what I did. I actually did this. I'm going to show you. Okay, I am in the Scorpio chamber, and what I have done is I have collected every item in the game and piled it up in this one chamber. Now, after finding the 25-2 clue, I learned it was two items in two different rooms that set the clue off. I said, okay, this is what I'll do. Grab the first item down there in the bottom left. Let's go up one. This is Libra. Pop it in. Go up one. Nothing happens. Go back down. Grab it. Go up in the next room. Virgo. Pop it in. Nothing happens. Now, that's what I did. I went through every single room with all the objects in the first room, which is Scorpio in this case, and the one item, which was the food, and I just went through every room until I got it back in here, and then I started with the grappling hook. Next, put the food back in here, and you can imagine how ridiculously long this would take. I left the Atari on. I just turned the television off, and I got a notepad, and I wrote down where everything was, in case, because back when we lived out in the country, the wind could blow hard and we could lose the electricity for an hour or two. So I always kept notes, and I literally did this. I don't remember how long it took, but it took a long time. That's how obsessed I was with finding the next clue, but of course I never did. I never did find it. It was at this point that I just said the hell with it. There's no way. But the sad thing is that you never saw the solution to the game. I mean, Atari would put the solution who won the contest, and they had the special version they used for that contest. It was easy, but they never gave out the solution. If any of y'all ever found it before the internet in a magazine or anything, let me know, because I don't think it existed. They never let it out. And so I finally moved on and forgot about it, and I was a teenager, played other video games, chased girls, do regular teenager stuff. And So sometime probably about 20, 25 years ago, I don't know how it popped in my mind, Swordquest did, and just out of the blue, I was like, I wonder if anybody's ever put the solution on the internet before. So I jumped on there. Okay, this is the site that I found it on. It's still up to this day. YosemiteSam.net. Does anybody have any idea who owns this? It's been up. This has been up for 20 plus years. But this is where I found it. Okay, here's the solution. Now, the 25-6, the third clue in the game was 2 objects, the grappling hook and the rope, in 2 different rooms. So that's what I thought all of them would be. Of course, that was wrong. And as you go down this list, you can see the next clue, 13-3, was 3 items in 3 rooms. Then they do the same thing again, 3 items, 3 rooms, 3 items, 3 rooms. Then it goes to 4 items in 4 rooms, then 5 items, 5 rooms, and on and on. The final clue uses, I think, every object in the game. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it uses every item in the game. I'm not going to count all the rooms up, but it looks like it's just about all of them. I mean, what the hell is that? I mean, who's making this game and decides, I mean, you would have a better chance of hitting the Powerball than to ever figure that out. I mean, I'm just talking out of my ass, but I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. And this is what they did. If anybody out there that had anything to do with this game or was behind the scenes ever sees this video, please tell me how in the hell they came up with this concept for this game. Something that could never be figured out and that had nothing to do with any kind of adventure or quest. Please tell me. Now, I did finish the game. I got the solution off of there and I finished it. And then what was even more terrible, and I guess they figured, what the hell, why should we put any effort into it? Nobody's ever going to do this anyway. I mean, it just takes you to another room with this sword, the warrior sword, and you collect it and you exit. And you go back to the title screen, then you go into this room, but whenever you exit, the game doesn't even end. You just keep wandering around. There's nothing. It's like you're trapped in there forever. And I mean, they never had any intentions of making this worth a shit. Okay, thank y'all for watching. Like, subscribe, share. See you next time. Bye bye.